Put a smiley face on this time. That is a new start. Thank you. Okay, so Bella, what do you think this life night is gonna be?
We're preparing ourselves for Lent. So
We're eating hot dogs.
yeah, we're eating hot dogs.
Hey, long time no see.
Yeah, we haven't been here in a while.
Yeah, I know.
Our priests, Father Anthony, Father Beto, Father Francisco, they make a lot of sacrifices. They don't live in the same town where their family is from. So they have to be away from their family to take care of us and make us their family. So these are some of their sacrifices and many things that we would not know because we're not priests. So since we're not priests, we don't know exactly what that sacrifice looks like, but it's a pretty big sacrifice that they're making. So along with the religious sisters, like our religious sisters that we just got here, they moved to here from a whole other country to be with a bunch of people who are, some of them may speak their language, some don't, but we share a similar culture, but not exactly the same culture that they are familiar to, and they're just living here to sacrifice and be with us and help us take care of our parish family. So during Lent, the church is encouraging us to embrace and even more deeply invitations to sacrifice. So some of those sacrifices that we're going to do during this liturgical season are, if you just came from Mass right now, Father Anthony talked about some of them. On Wednesday is Ash Wednesday. It's the beginning of Lent, the beginning of the 40 days. And on that day, we're asked to fast and to abstain from meat. So the fasting and the abstaining from meat only happen on 2 days of the year, of the Lenten season, that are, I guess, like required or like an obligation. So that's Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. Both of those 2 days, you are asked to abstain from meat and to fast, which means 1 full meal and 2 partial meals. That's what you're allowed to do. Unless you have, maybe you're under 14 or you're elderly or you need to eat due to medical reasons. So those are a few exceptions, but those things are on those 2 days. Then the rest of the Fridays in Lent, we are abstaining from meat. They're not fasting days, but they are abstaining from meat. So some of the things that we can do are abiding by those things. Like that's the bare minimum, right? But we're also asked to make other kinds of sacrifices. Maybe go beyond that. Some people give up meat the whole 40 days. Some people fast during the whole 40 days and do different kinds of fasting like that. Some people maybe will take up an extra prayerful thing, like maybe going to Mass every day, or by going to a weekly confession, or pray your rosary every day, just adding to their regular day. So instead of maybe giving up something, which is something very common also, to give up something. A lot of people like to give up sweets. For whatever reason, I'm not really sure why people do that. Probably everybody has a different reason why they give up sweets during Lent. It is a sacrifice to give that up. But you also have to be thinking about, while you're giving that up, is it changing you? Is it drawing your heart closer to Christ by giving that item up? Would you maybe be called better to add something in that's more prayerful than just giving up something that is just temporary, that you have no intentions of going any further, and you're not replacing it with something? So maybe if you're going to give something up like sweets, that instead of eating this candy, every time I feel the desire to eat a piece of candy, I'm going to offer a prayer for the souls in purgatory, or I'm going to offer a prayer for somebody who's suffering. Doing something in place of that, not just like, or I'm going to use it as a dieting time. Like right now, I'm going to go on this diet and give up whatever I want to eat so I can maybe lose a few pounds during the 40 days. That's more beneficial for yourself than the actual sacrifice. What are you sacrificing in that scenario if you are just going to give up something that's benefiting you in another way? The point of what we're doing, the sacrifice that we're making, it should be drawing us closer to Christ in some way or another. Changing our hearts, making it more to turning to Him, turning away from sin. So maybe we would examine our conscience, look at some of the things that we're doing that may be sinful, that are leading us away from Christ. So we would go to, maybe, I'm just going to be honest with y'all, my thing that I'm going to be giving up, and I'm hoping that it sticks. I'm so happy that you're filming when I'm going to say this to someone. I'm going to, hopefully, prayerfully give up saying cuss words. I know, y'all may be shocked that this is something that maybe I never knew that would do. I hope you're all shocked. Wow. Please be shocked. Wow. Be shocked. Whoa. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Subject to liberty, not for its own accord, but because of the one who subjected it. In hope, the creation itself would be set free from slavery to corruption and share in the glorious freedom.
Subject to emptiness, not willingly, but for the sake of the ones who made it subject unto hope.
Sees with inexpressible feelings, and the one who searches hearts with the intention of spirit, because it intercedes for the holy ones according to God's.
Together, Isaac spoke to his father Abraham. Father, he said, here I am. He replied. Isaac continued, here are the fire and the wood, but where is the sheep for the burnt offering? My son, Abraham answered, God will provide the sheep for the burnt offering.
So what does not eating meat one day each week mean to God? Is any bigger than just not eating meat?
Then God said, take your son, Isaac, your only one whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. There offer him as a burnt offering on one of the heights that I will point you out to you.
that we might be cleansed of sin and live with you forever. Bless us as we gather to reflect on his suffering and death, that we may learn from his example the way we should go. We ask this through that same Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
We adore you, O Christ, and we bless you.
Because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world.
First station, Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to the disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took along Peter and 2 sons of Zebedee, and began to feel sorrow and distress. Then he said to them, "My soul is sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and keep watch with me." He advanced a little and fell prostrate in prayer, saying, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet, not as I will, but as your will." When he returned to his disciples, he found them asleep. He said to Peter, "So you could not keep watch with me for 1 hour? Watch and pray, that you may not undergo the test. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Matthew chapter 25, verse 36 through 41.
Second station, when Jesus, betrayed by Judas, is arrested. Then, while Jesus was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived, accompanied by a crowd with swords and clubs, who had come from the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders. His betrayer had arranged a signal with them, saying, "The man I shall kiss is the one. Arrest him and lead him away securely." He came and immediately went over to him and said, "Rabbi," and he kissed him. At this they laid hands on him and arrested him. Mark chapter 14, verses 43 to 46. Third station, Jesus is condemned by the Sanhedrin. When day came, the council of elders of the people met, both chief priests and scribes, and they brought him before their Sanhedrin. They said, "If you are the Messiah, tell us." But he replied to them, "If I tell you, you will not believe.
and if I question, you will not respond. But from this time on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of the power of God. They all asked, Are you then the Son of God? He replied to them, You say that I am. Then they said, What further need have we for testimony? We have heard it from his own mouth. Luke chapter 22, verses 66 through 71.
Fourth station. Jesus is denied by Peter. Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. One of the maids came over to him and said, You too were with Jesus the Galilean. But he denied it in front of everyone, saying, I do not know what you are talking about. As he went out to the gate, another girl saw him and said to those who were there, This man was with Jesus the Nazarene. Again he denied it with an oath, I do not know the man. A little later, the bystanders came over and said to Peter, Surely you too are one of them. Even your speech gives you away. And that he began to curse and to swear, I do not know the man. And immediately a cock crowed. Then Peter remembered the word that Jesus had spoken. Before the cock crowed, you will deny me 3 times. He went out and began to weep bitterly. Matthew chapter 26, verse 69 through 75.
Fifth station. Jesus is judged by Pilate. The chief priests with the elders and the scribes, that is, the whole Sanhedrin, held a council. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. Pilate questioned him, Are you the king of the Jews? He said to him in reply, You say so. The chief priests accused him of many things. Again, Pilate questioned him, Have you no answer? See how many things he accused you of. Jesus gave him no further answer, so that Pilate was amazed. Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas and handed Jesus over to be crucified. Mark chapter 15, 1 through 5 and 15.
Sixth station. Jesus is scourged and crowned with thorns. When the chief priests and the guards saw Jesus, they cried out, Crucify him, crucify him. Pilate said to them, Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no guilt in him. They cried out, Take him away, crucify him. Pilate said to them, Shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, We have no king but Caesar. Then he handed him over to be crucified. So they took Jesus, and carrying the cross himself, he went out to what is called the place of the skull, in Hebrew, Golgotha. John chapter 19, verse 6 and 15 through 17.
Seventh station. Jesus bears the cross. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him scourged, and the soldiers wove a crown of thorns and placed it on his head, and clothed him in a purple cloak. And they came to him and said, Hail, King of the Jews! And they struck him repeatedly. John chapter 19, verses 1 through 3.
A station. Jesus is helped by Simon the Cyrenian to carry the cross. They pressed into service a passerby, Simon, a Cyrenian, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross.
Ninth station. Jesus meets the women of Jerusalem. A large crowd of people followed Jesus, including many women who mourned and lamented him. Jesus turned to them and said, Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep instead for yourselves and for your children. For indeed, the days are coming when people say, Blessed are the barren, the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed. At that time, people will say to the mountains, Fall upon us, and to the hills, cover us. For if these things are done when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?
10th station. Jesus is crucified. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him and the criminals there, one on his right, the other on his left. Then Jesus said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Luke chapter 23, verse 33 through 34.
11th station. Jesus promises his kingdom to the good thief. Now one of the criminals hanging there reviled Jesus, saying, Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us. The other, however, rebuking him, said in reply, Have you no fear of God, for you are subject to the same condemnation. And indeed, we have been condemned justly, for the sentence we receive corresponds to our crimes. But this man has done nothing criminal. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. He replied to him, Amen, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. Luke chapter 23, verses 39 to 43.
12th station. Jesus speaks to his mother and the disciple. Standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary of Magdala. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple there whom he loved, he said to his mother, Woman, behold your son. Then he said to the disciple, Behold your mother. And from that hour the disciple took her into his home.
13th station. Jesus dies on the cross. It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, because of an eclipse of the sun. Then the veil of the temple was torn down the middle. Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. And when he had said this, he breathed his last. Luke chapter 23, verse 44 through 46.
14th station. Jesus is placed in the tomb. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was himself a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be handed over. Taking the body, Joseph wrapped it in clean linen and laid it in his new tomb that he had hewn in the rock. Then he rolled a huge stone across the entrance to the tomb and departed. Matthew chapter 27, verse 57 through 60.
You actually did a really good job reading it.
Thanks.
What's B-roll?
You know, like when those really cinematic shots things. That's what I think it is.
Oh, thank you.
Or I could just bleep it out. This concludes this episode of Wise Night. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like
And hit the bell.
and subscribe.
Yes.
Wait, you have to subscribe first before you hit the bell.
After the parade.
Yeah.